So, where was I? There was no question that He-Man and the Masters of the Universe was one of the most popular shows and toy lines of the 80s. But success doesn't last forever, and while She-Ra helped breathe some life into the franchise, as the decade came to a close, the power of Grayskull began to fade. Much of which can be attributed to the bombing of the 1987 live-action film. Because adapting a cartoon to live-action is rarely a good idea. And Mattel saw the writing on the wall, but they were not about to let one of their most popular characters go just yet, so they decided to refresh the franchise, and there were many ways of which they were going to do that. One idea was a new toy line called the Powers of Grayskull, which would feature Hero, He-Man's predecessor from the past. Unfortunately, the toy line was cancelled, but Hero was revived as part of the Motu Classics line and showed up briefly in the Netflix show Revelation. Another idea was to have a successor to the Powers of Grayskull, namely He-Man's adopted son named Dare, who would become Hero again. And he would fight Skeletor's son, Skeletine. Yes, that was his name. Also, I really don't want to know how Skeletor has a kid. Ugh, I said I didn't want to know. But then there was going to be another version of Dare who was actually He-Man's biological son who also becomes Hero. Boy, they sure love that name, huh? And it was also going to introduce a bunch of new wacky characters and... Okay, listen, the attempts to continue the Masters of the Universe franchise was a long-winded, confusing, and convoluted mess. So I'm going to try and summarize as best I can. For now, all you need to know is that Filmation was planning another Masters of the Universe series, but ended up closing in 1989. Mattel was still developing concepts and characters, but needed someone to produce the cartoon. Enter a small and upcoming animation studio called Jetlag Productions, who would later be known for producing direct-to-video Disney knockoff films, but would also assist in the making of the series Conan the Adventurer. Which is ironic because early designs of He-Man were based on Conan the Barbarian, and those designs ended up becoming a separate character called Vicor. Oh my god, Masters of the Universe is such a rabbit hole. Let's just stay on topic. So Jetlag was given creative control over the new show with all the ideas given to them from Mattel, and in 1990 we got The New Adventures of He-Man, a 65-episode animated series that came with a brand new line of action figures that were absolutely not compatible with your already existing Masters of the Universe figures. Good job, Mattel. I will say, however, the commercial for the roleplay sword might be one of the best toy commercials of all time.
The new He-Man Power Sword.
Cool! It makes sound!
That's all.
Skeletor!
The Power Sword makes 8 action sounds. It lights up with power. You can be a hero. With the He-Man Power Sword.
I don't know who that kid is, but wherever he is right now, he better be defending the universe from evil. The show featured a redesigned He-Man and a redesigned Skeletor on all new adventures with a new cast of characters. The show's not really talked about that much and is often considered the black sheep of Masters of the Universe, probably because of how jarringly different and weird it is. In fact, I remember hearing that there was once a time that people who worked for Mattel refused to even talk about it. Well, I think we've waited long enough. Let's take a look at the new adventures of He-Man. In the distant future, a planet called Primus, not to be confused with Primus, or Primus, is under attack by evil mutants from space. Their only defense is a planetary shield generated by the power of the planet's inner council. However, the people of Primus have not known war for a long time and need help defending themselves. Their wisest member, Master Cebrian, sends 2 of their best heroes to the past to find a force of good to help them. They wind up on Eternia in the past, where they run into Skeletor, who tricks them into believing he's a good guy, because he's just so trustworthy. The sorceress alerts He-Man, and after revealing his true identity to his parents and saying farewell, he and Skeletor both return with them to their time. Skeletor joins the mutants, and He-Man vows to protect the Primans and teach them how to defend themselves, while the sorceress maintains communication with him from all the way in the past. And as you can see, things are looking very different from the Filmation cartoon. So in addition to a whole bunch of new characters, the few recurring characters from Masters of the Universe got a makeover. Prince Adam traded in his lady-killing pink vest for a more Greek hero look, I guess, and He-Man traded in his furry Speedo for a pair of blue jeans. In the toy line, he actually has armor and a helmet, but he's never seen wearing that in the show. Well, regardless, aesthetically it works pretty well. Then there's Skeletor. You've already seen him, but yeah, this is how he looks. They gave him eyeballs. Eyeballs inside of a skull just looks inherently silly. I don't know why they did that, because he doesn't have eyeballs in any of the official art or on the action figure. It just looks dumb. He looks like a goofy Halloween decoration. Now, there are comics that explain why certain things look different, but much like how the Filmation cartoon had little to do with the original mini-comics, the New Adventures cartoon also had little to do with its corresponding comics. So rather than going into too much detail about that, I'm just going to be sticking to what's in the show. We do get some very different voices as well. Adam and He-Man are now voiced by Gary Chalk, who I think does a pretty good job.
By the power of Grayskull,
But Skeletor is voiced by Campbell Lane, and, well...
I'm Skeletor, this planet's original good person.
Boy, that's jarringly different. Far cry from the iconic Alan Oppenheimer voice.
You've won this time, but I'll be back.
Though to be fair, he did seem like he was having fun with the character, and even had a few good moments that feel very Skeletor.
It's almost enough to make even me smile. I think I will smile. Did I tell you to smile? You don't breathe unless I tell you to. In fact, stop breathing.
It should be noted that his look changes quite a few times in the show. In one episode, his eyes are inexplicably black, which looks a bit more like the official art. But in that same episode, he finds a crystal that makes him look like this. So, he's more powerful now, right? Nope! This is just how he looks now. And he looks like this for most of the show, at least until a later episode when his helmet gets destroyed.
You've waited so long to see the real me. Well, take a look!
Oh my god, you're... bald? Though I do like the detail of the little strands of hair on the back of his head. It's kind of gross and weird. Okay, maybe I should just talk about the new characters. Master Cebrian is the wise leader of Primus, who offers wisdom and guidance as well as keep Adam's secret by having him pose as his nephew. His young assistant is Mara, who doesn't really do a whole lot until later in the series when she gets a much bigger role and even does some fighting. By whipping her hair. She even has a little mace on the end of her ponytail. Adorable. Though as silly as this is, there's a part of me that really likes this concept for some reason. I'm not sure why. The two heroes who were sent to the past are Commander Hydron, who, as his name suggests, is the water guy. I do like that he's the commander because you rarely see that with the water guy of the group. Though what's weird is I don't think I've seen him in water at all in the entire series. Yet he wears his diving gear all the time, even while he's flying the spaceship. At one point they establish he's from an underwater city, which makes sense, but even then he doesn't actually go in the water. Was he afraid to swim? The other is Lieutenant Flipshot, who was later renamed to his international name Icarus, because Nerf acquired the copyright to that name for one of their toys. Unlike Hydron, who is very stern and by the books, Flipshot is more brash and cocky. Thankfully, he doesn't cause too much trouble. Now, what's weird about this show is that there were a bunch of other characters from the toy line that were barely seen, mostly regulated to bit parts or just showing up out of nowhere to help a few times. But there were a bunch of characters that were seen frequently. One is Sagitar, who's supposed to be a centaur, but he's just a humanoid with an extra pair of arms that he walks on sometimes. He actually comes from a planet of other humanoids just like him that evolved from ancient wild horses. Did I mention that this show is weird? There's Spinwit, whose name sounds like an insult. You lousy Spinwit. And as his name suggests, he's another Masters of the Universe character with the power of Speen.
Spin!
First Cyclone, and then Spinnerella, and now him. The three of them should hang out and talk about spinning, I guess. Tuscador might be my favorite, not just because of how absurd he is with the way he attacks in his ridiculous outfit, but also because he doesn't speak much in the show. Kind of reminds me of Chuckles from G.I. Joe a little bit. One figure that I really liked was Artilla, who was this cool-looking robot with gun arms. But in the show, he has a very human face, with an eye patch. So I guess he's a cyborg? The show never really explains. Also, he's got the scariest voice I've heard from a hero in a while.
The first rule of Galactic Guardian is to follow the orders he is given. Someday your time will come.
Don't worry, I'm here to save you! Some of the other characters are Drissy, who can communicate with animals and tends to the livestock of the entire planet, I guess. And her little brother Kaz, who, as you might have guessed, is the kid character that sometimes gets in the way or gets in trouble. Fortunately, it didn't happen a whole lot. Did anyone ever really like characters like this? Because I never cared for the kid character of a show. I'm here for He-Man, not Kaz. I mean, I get why they exist. They're supposed to be an analog for the kids watching, but they're always screwing up or getting into trouble. Can't they be written a little bit better? Well, like I said, it wasn't really too much of a problem. And he wasn't the most annoying character in the show. No, that goes to these guys. 4 scientists that are usually helpful, but are very bumbling and are constantly bickering. On top of that, they're also given extremely irritating voices.
I knew it! I just knew you'd overload it! Me? I overloaded it! It was your bright idea to have it count all the stars in the Tri-Solar Galaxy!
Oh, and I suppose having it chart the entire course of scientific knowledge didn't put a strain on it!
They're also cowards, too. They're afraid of the mutants and freak out just by hearing the word mutant.
You must hurry. The mutants.
Mutants!
They aren't here yet.
Speaking of which, I guess we should start talking about them. The leader of the mutants is Flog, who is called that because he uses a whip. This is a naming convention that we'll see a lot with the mutants. Even though he's the leader, he really doesn't come off as one. He feels more like an underling, which I guess is appropriate since his decisions are often influenced by Skeletor because he's kind of dumb. One of the more recognizable villains from the toy line was Slushhead, some kind of swamp creature that has a dome filled with water over his head, and somehow is able to talk.
Give him the present! This is gonna be great. We're finally gonna get even with him for always putting mutants down.
The only female member of the mutants is Krita, who later becomes Mara's rival and can often be seen flirting with Skeletor.
Skeletor, you're so evil. That's what I like about you.
What a coincidence. That's what I like about me, too.
Ooh, Evelyn is gonna be pissed! So just like with the heroes, a lot of the villains from the toy line weren't used much. One figure that gained a lot of popularity was Optic, who is this weird robot guy with a giant eyeball head, and he was barely in the show.
Something's wrong! There's no one there! The village is deserted!
That's also a weird voice they gave him. Though I don't really know what I was expecting from a character like this. What is an eyeball supposed to sound like? And like I said before, the mutants' names are basically what they do, like Quake, who has a big club and causes earthquakes, Hoove, who kicks, and Karate, who karate chops. Because that'll stop He-Man. Staghorn was one that was seen pretty frequently. He uses antlers to attack.
The last time I recall, it was on your planet. Far, far from here.
If this is ever adapted to live action, he's being played by Carl Urban. I do not make the rules. But by far the best mutant is BH. Do you want to know what the BH stands for? I swear this is true. Butthead. He's called that because his action figure has a head-butting action, but I guess they didn't want to call him that in the show, so they abbreviated it. They also made him kind of stupid.
Hey, this isn't cooked enough. That's better.
What a stupid character. That's my butthead impression.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
So as you've noticed, the show looks way different from the Filmation cartoon, in that it doesn't rely on recycled visuals and animation. In fact, there are some bits of really good animation in the show. Though as the show went on, the quality did drop a bit, but that's to be expected. Some of the designs of the mutants and the heroes were pretty cool, but only when they're in their full gear. Without their helmets and stuff, they just look like generic dudes. Overall, the show looks nice on a technical level, but it's nothing really to write home about. You know, despite its flaws, the Filmation show is still a lot of fun to watch. Sure, it was mostly recycled animations, but there was something about it that just worked. It was the crudest, cheapest way to make a cartoon, but some combination of the designs, music, and voice acting just made it exciting. I can still look at the Filmation cartoon to this day and be like, yeah, He-Man! I look at New Adventures and I'm like, yeah, He-Man, I guess. New Adventures is like Diet He-Man. It's just so drastically different from the original show that it's hard to accept. But just because it's different doesn't necessarily make it bad, and there are some things that the show did pretty well. For example, New Adventures does have some good continuity. While Filmation only had an occasional recurring character and some small plot points, it wasn't really the show's focus. In New Adventures, they would establish some minor characters that would show up pretty frequently. Toward the end, we meet these two factions of aliens that are at war with each other, and they end up becoming part of the show. And these guys were apparently part of an unproduced toy line. When they attack, they stack on top of each other, which I assume was going to be their play feature. The funny thing is, the leader of the bad guys is named General Niffle, but every time someone says his name, it just sounds like nipple.
Our spies are certain the mites have discovered a transhumor mine, General Niffle.
I just hear nipple. There were also several multi-part story arcs. There was one about the mutants releasing a bunch of cute animals all over Primus that end up becoming monsters and wreaked havoc. There was another arc about a mysterious alien that wanted to put the good guys and bad guys against each other in a competition, which was a recycled idea from Filmation, but this was a bit more developed, albeit a bit silly at times. Though one part that was pretty surprising, and I can't believe I'm saying this, was Skeletor. Despite what I said earlier, this version of Skeletor is a pretty effective villain. Filmation Skeletor looked intimidating, but was kinda goofy, even though that's why we loved him. But New Adventures Skeletor looked goofy, but was secretly intimidating. He successfully manipulated the mutants and almost won a few times. He even nearly destroys Primus. Don't mess with this Skeletor, he'll blow up your planet. Though there was one major similarity between this and the Filmation cartoon. They kept the PSAs. Yeah, they were still doing these. You'd think by the 90s they would have stopped, but no, they were still everywhere. Just like with the Filmation show, I'm pretty sure they didn't want to do these because they were clearly rushed through. In fact, I'm confident I can show an entire one without getting a copyright claim.
You're in a big hurry, Flipshot.
Yeah, I'm going to Titus. I hear they just got a new video game in.
Be sure you do your pre-flight checklist before you take off.
No time right now. Gotta get there fast.
Before you ride your bike, be sure to take a few minutes to see that it's all in good condition. That can make the difference between a safe ride and a bad ride.
You know, Primus is supposed to be a peaceful society. What video games are they playing? Animal Crossing? These PSAs had nothing to do with the episodes they're attached to, by the way. In the Filmation cartoon, they related it to the episode. Sometimes it was a stretch, but at least they tried to tie it all together. Also, they would talk about it rather than act it out like in New Adventures. Seeing these characters act like childish idiots felt very demeaning. Oh my god, am I defending the Filmation PSA segments? How about we talk about a few episodes? One thing I mentioned in my review of the Filmation show is how I wish there was more episodes where Adam has to overcome problems without the help of He-Man. Well, New Adventures has an episode like that. In the episode You're in the Army Now, Adam is accused of deserting a battle when he actually left to become He-Man, but he was framed by a mutant spy and ended up bringing him down by himself. This also shows how problematic having a secret identity can be. It's something they seem to be phasing out of more recent Masters of the Universe shows, and I'm kind of okay with it because it was never really an important part of the series, especially since it's so easy to figure out. Which brings us to the episode Adam's Adventure, where Skeletor tries to find out He-Man's secret identity.
I know one of you is He-Man in disguise.
One of us? He-Man? Surely you must be mistaken.
I have recorded He-Man's brainwaves, and brainwaves don't lie.
Adam is right there! Surely this version of Skeletor knows who Prince Adam is, right? Doesn't he find it a little suspicious that someone else from Eternia is here also? Ugh. I take back what I said. This version of Skeletor is stupid. What a spinwit. Okay, look, there were some decent episodes, but I think it's more fun to talk about the dumb ones. In the episode He-Fan, He-Man finds out he has a fan who might be a little too enthusiastic.
Just a touch, the hatch he passes through. And inside is the seat where he sits. I did it. I'm in the Colossus, sitting in He-Man's...
We'll pull a surprise attack.
Right. We'll come in low and hit them before they know it.
Okay, I can't be the only one that was expecting her to sniff the seat. This lady makes Frosta look sane by comparison. One episode I found amusing was 4 Ways to Sundown, which has a trope that I didn't realize I liked as much as I did. You know, the one where multiple characters tell the same story from their perspective and make themselves look good and everyone else look dumb, including He-Man.
I just don't know what we'd do without that sword of yours. It sure can cut bushes.
Aw, go easy on the jokes, Captain Hydran. Not everyone can be a bold hero like you.
Hey, some of us were made to defend galaxies, others to cut bushes. The important thing is to be a good bush cutter.
In Rock to the Future, they discover some rock star from modern-day Earth ended up in their time in space, somehow. He puts on a concert on Primus, and everyone dresses like they're fans of 80s hair metal. It was the very early 90s. It was still in style. By the way, this guy's name is Hank Rappa, which is a clear reference to famous rock star Frank Zappa. That's another thing about this show, the blatant references to other things which feel very out of place. In the episode Dreaditor, the mutants send the titular Dreaditor to fight He-Man. He's a skilled hunter with the ability to turn invisible, just like the Predator. Then there's the insanely obvious references to Star Wars. The mutants have soldiers that are just stormtroopers, and there's an episode where Adam just straight up does a Jedi mind trick.
Anyone on the street needs authorization papers.
I have no papers.
But he needs no papers.
But you need no papers.
So he is free to go.
So you are free to go.
While Masters of the Universe got inspiration from other sources, it was entirely its own thing. It didn't resort to ripping off movies. Now at this point you might be asking yourself, do we see any other Masters of the Universe characters in this show? And yes, we get to see one other character. Kinda. In the episode Once Upon a Time, the sorceress arranges for a familiar ally to visit He-Man.
Greetings from Eternia!
Teela?
Yup, it's Teela. Exactly as we remember her. You know, despite the redesigns of the characters, for the most part they do read as who they're supposed to be. But this character looks nothing like Teela. Couldn't they have at least given her red hair? Actually, there is a popular fan theory that this character was originally supposed to be She-Ra. She definitely resembles She-Ra a lot more than Teela. Now, digging up specific details about the show was not easy, but I did read that She-Ra was originally supposed to be in the show. But like I said in my review of She-Ra, the character has some legal problems that prevent her from teaming up with He-Man again. So I'm guessing they had intended for She-Ra to show up and just couldn't get permission to use the character, but they had already designed a character, so they just decided to call her Teela and use it anyway. At least that's the best I can figure. But I guess it's good they made this character Teela instead. Mara starts getting jealous because she's spending a lot of time with He-Man, and had that been She-Ra, He-Man's sister, well, that would have been weird even for this show. Believe it or not, the show actually had an ending. After a big battle, the mutants are finally defeated and sign a peace treaty with Primus, but Skeletor is not interested in that, so he and Krita challenge He-Man and Mara to one final battle. He-Man takes Skeletor's staff, thus robbing him of his magic, then seals him and Krita in a ship and sends them off into space. To starve to death, I guess. You know, it probably would have been a lot less messed up if he had just killed them. Skeletor vows to somehow escape, but peace is finally returned to Primus, though they don't establish whether or not He-Man returns to his own time. Well, that kind of sucks. The New Adventures of He-Man is alright. Though in many ways superior to the Filmation cartoon, it kinda lacks the presentation and excitement of its predecessor. It's not a bad show, just mostly dull and forgettable, which is probably why nobody ever talks about it. However, it does have a bit of a cult following in the Masters of the Universe community. And it seems they finally acknowledged that people did like the show, so many of the characters were released as part of the Motu Classics line. And they even gave She-Ra a proper New Adventures makeover. And overall, the series seems to be accepted as its own separate continuity. I can only recommend the show if you're a Masters of the Universe completionist, but it's not easy to find. Episodes are on YouTube, but as usual, the quality varies. But fortunately, there were DVD sets released. Volume 1 is pretty easy to come by, but Volume 2, however... yeah, not so much. You notice how I have mine wrapped in plastic? Well, that's because it's very rare. I was able to get it for a reasonable price a while back, and I'm very fortunate to have done so, because I don't think anyone ever bothered to rip this because it's so hard to find, but it's the only way you can watch the second half of the series with good quality video. So it's very important that it be preserved. What do you mean the entire series is streaming on Peacock? Well, I guess the good news is you have options to watch it if you're interested. Okay, I know it took a while. Thank you very much for your patience. I do plan to finish what I started, so I'm going to have to ask for your patience one more time, because I plan to finish this Masters of the Universe retrospective, and when I come back, I'm reviewing the 2002 reboot. However long that takes. See you on the other side. It's okay. I have pillows down here to let it land on so it doesn't get damaged. I had to do a lot of takes of that though, so it was very scary. Put you down. Good boy.
By the power of Eternia,